guess you feel you'll always be.
From Software as a video game company has always went against the grain since their inception. It would be fair to say as a company they always took chances. I would go as far as to assert that they were founded with that very aspiration in mind. We can illustrate this by looking all the way back at their first game, Kingsfield, which had a so-so reception on release due to its difficulty and its unconventional structure. Yet their next releases would be 2 sequels, with Kingsfield 3 retitled as 2 in the West, getting just as a polarising reception as the first. From Software would then have success with Armored Core, and while using that game's revenue to produce multiple sequels to keep the lights on, that didn't stop them from creating their unconventional games. And when I say unconventional, I don't mean bad, just something the gaming public wasn't necessarily accustomed to, such as Echo Night, a low-key horror game which has you helping ghosts on an abandoned ship. And that's to name one of the countless examples I could mention. Going by the title of the video, evidently this isn't a From Software history lesson, and while I would love to go through some of the company's out there games from decades past, many YouTubers have already beaten that dead horse, pummeled it in fact, and I doubt anyone would care, because these games don't matter to a lot of people. The implication being, many view the company as only coming into existence with the release of 2009's Demon's Souls and its spiritual successor, Dark Souls, despite it coming from the same camp of From Software's eccentric game design, and that's indicative of the game's director. Miyazaki had a degree in social science, yet From Software hired him anyway. That's a testament to what type of company they were. They were risk takers at the end of the day, and with the Souls games it paid off. It struck a chord with an audience, probably due to its old school philosophy to game design that From Software had with all of their games to this point. But at this point in time, their games contrasted the most with modern game design. See, the trend with games at the time was all about being cinematic, with a tightly controlled story and linear gameplay. It was all about spectacle and less about the gameplay itself. While here was a game that couldn't care less if you knew what was going on or not, letting the player figure out things for themselves. If you're watching this, you know what happens next. It becomes a huge franchise, practically creating its own genre in gaming, and so on and so forth. This is important for what I'm about to say next. Elden RIng released a 20-minute gameplay demonstration, and after seeing what it has to offer, I now feel safe in voicing my opinion. To start, let's just say the game looks completely inoffensive for a Souls fan, as it's got nothing that a Souls fan wouldn't deem acceptable. From that perspective, it's the game fans have anticipated, so it's nothing more, nothing less. But for me, it's utterly disappointing. Now, how can I make this statement without even playing the game? Well, let me explain why. It will probably come as no surprise, but video game companies have comfort zones. Take Ubisoft with their open worlds as a prime example. Over time, development teams become accustomed to producing a certain style of game. How do you think Ubisoft manages to release a massive open world game almost yearly? The company has become almost robotic in its design. It's now to the point where playing a modern Ubisoft open world game can almost feel like it was made by an algorithm. This comfort zone mentality is not good, especially in the long run, as over time you become creatively bankrupt. That's not to say doing the same thing a couple of times is a bad thing. Refinement of a novel idea is why it can be helpful initially. This is why a lot of sequels are often better than the first game by a long way. Over a period of time though, it can start working against you, as you stop taking risks and start giving the audience what they expect. From Software made 3 Dark Souls games, with the third offering little to nothing new, which only went to justify some of the wacky decisions in 2. We also had 2 spin-offs, or at the very least games in the same vein, if you want to get bogged down in semantics, with Bloodborne being a Lovecraftian inspired world, with faster combat and no block. Sekiro on the other hand, a Japanese folklore inspired world, with no stamina meter, and has the player timing perfect blocks. Now while I have massive problems with Sekiro's game design, and we might save that for another video, I will say Bloodborne and Sekiro managed to squeeze different identities for itself, despite matching the Dark Souls gameplay so much. Still, I fundamentally believe an idea has its limits, and there's only so many changes you can make to the formula before the game stops benefiting from it, and quickly becomes gimmicky for the sake of it. I thought From Software had realised that with the Souls series, and started to move on. From Software are starting to back themselves into a corner I think companies like Ubisoft are desperate to get out of, where you've milked an idea for all it's worth, and now you're just repeating yourself. Why companies struggle to realise this until it's too late is because it often takes fan bases a while to catch on themselves. When games are giving you everything you've asked for, it can take a while before you realise all you wanted was something new in the first place. With Sekiro, I felt From Software had hit that illusionary wall, so to speak. I thought they took the Souls series gameplay and did everything they could with it, and I got a real sense from the company it was time to move on, at least for the time being. So now I think you know where I'm going with this. However, before I make the obvious point, I'll provide you with two living examples. VatiVidya and Iron Pineapple are two incredibly successful YouTubers who got started by making videos on Dark Souls and have continued doing so to this day. While Vati is more related to the core franchise, Iron Pineapple is more so Dark Souls associated. Both have done so well on YouTube by connecting themselves to the Souls series. They will never step out of that boundary. Iron Pineapple has actually done reviews on the old From Software games, but the majority of the video is one big showcase to how From Software's previous games connects to the Souls series. There is much reviews as they are a vehicle to talk about Dark Souls related things. It's about how many references he can find to the mainline series. He observes everything through a Dark Souls lens, which is kind of deflating in a way, since it feels like he's not judging the game by its own merit. Instead, he's judging the game by how closely it matches a modern Souls game.
Ends up dying while you search. This well of healing has dried up. Monsters have seemingly overrun the area and everything is in a state of ruin. All of this together creates a familiar feeling to the Souls games. You could even call some of them crestfallen. Yep, I bet you didn't think it went back that far, but it sure does. This is how you know it's a FromSoft game. It felt like I was suddenly playing a different game. A happier game. You need brief pockets of color and humanity in games like this. The Souls series nails this as well. Talk about fake walls. Quick refresher since I talked about it in the other Kingsfield video, fake or illusory walls have been a staple of the Souls series for a while. This is funny to me because Kingsfield being compared to Doom sort of mirrors how everything is compared to Dark Souls these days, and there's something kinda poetic about that.
Since he built his whole identity on YouTube from Dark Souls, it's not worth talking about unless the Souls series fits in somewhere. And Vati is in a very similar situation. I wonder what he thinks about other games with very deep lore. I guess we'll never know.
Over here. Yep, I knew it. He's listening to an audiobook with Audible.
At least not in a YouTube context anyway. While, now let's be fair, none of the fans will probably be watching this video. But I know many of them will say I would watch anything they'd make. And I believe them. Still, under that same token, the majority of them won't watch unless it's Dark Souls related. This mentality goes for the creators themselves. Why would they risk doing anything else when they are having great success riding the Souls series wave? As a self-proclaimed artist myself, I know that comfort zones is a lot like a prison of your own making. Now, don't get it twisted. This is not an attack on Dark Souls series creators, or any creator for that matter that talks about one IP only. And sorry to point these two individuals out. In fact, they rightfully should be laughing at me, who has no core audience and talks about whatever takes his fancy at the time. But the reason I've pointed them out is because they parallel From Software as a company itself. Because being locked to one thing stifles creativity. And while that's fine in some contexts, like being successful on YouTube, here with From Software it's a very sad thing to see. Durosane, and I hope to God I'm pronouncing that correctly, was a VR title from Software, released between Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro. It's a standalone title and has no connections to the Souls series whatsoever. Now let's watch what different people say about it.
This is a game that only is showing up on PlayStation VR and is a direct Sony product, similar to another little game that they have called Bloodborne.
Years, From Software and Hidetaka Miyazaki have gained acclaim for their groundbreaking action RPG titles in the Soul series.
Because you're a fan of From Software's other excellent series, Dark Souls.
These days the words From Software bring to mind brutally difficult third-person action games, namely Dark Souls and Bloodborne.
So, obviously, this description mirrors that of the Fiona doll, and these two characters together bring back memories of the childhood's beginning ending.
And of course, the title itself has a very similar font to Bloodborne, and there is a description for the item too that reads, "Prose of some terrible tale."
Bloodborne 2 could be a prequel, and that it could be set in Loran before it was consumed by the sands.
Oh, it's a doll. It's going to be like the doll from Bloodborne. It has somewhat of a similar sort of appearance.
Not what a lot of us were hoping for.
I get an uneasy feeling the fans and reviewers are against anything that's not Souls related from Software. This is indicative of the two YouTubers I just mentioned, because they too, perhaps unconsciously, only feel safe talking about something non-Dark Souls related if they can connect it back to the Souls series in some way. They're trapped in a sense by their own success they've made by talking about the subject. As such, that subject is the only thing that garners success in their eyes. On reflection, they've put themselves in a psychological feedback loop. I know I can come off like I'm sour grapes about the whole thing, but seriously, you guys do you. And that goes for any Dark Souls creator out there, or anyone interested in one thing. Don't let me or anyone else put you down. I'm just trying to prove a point here. And that point is, well, back to the Elden Ring. And it's Dark Souls with another title attached. Because that's the only game FromSoftware feel will be successful. They're essentially stuck in the same loop. When Elden Ring was just being created, what if I told you the most popular things with single player gamers, with fantasy shows like Game of Thrones, games with huge open worlds, and RPG stuff like level stats, crafting, and customization mechanics. Elden Ring is directed by Hideki Miyazaki and fantasy novelist George R.R. Martin, set in a huge open world with RPG leveling, crafting, and customization mechanics. FromSoftware has also become trapped by their own success in a way, and I can't help but be reminded of their humble beginnings and what they strived for in those days. People who made it to this stage in the video will probably be wanting to argue about the open world aspect they've added into Elden Ring, inferring that this new layer of complexity will make the series feel fresh again, but I'm doubtful. Maybe in the early hours I think it will feel new, but after a while, I think the open world grind will wear on a lot of people. Video game creation is much as an art form as it is a science. Trying to create or reinvent a game based on what was scientifically proven to work before only leads to stagnation. You still need plenty of room for the art form. For instance, take the open world element they have added with this. All the big video game companies are doing expansive open world games. In fact, they've been doing them for the last decade and a half. It's reached a point of oversaturation for a while now, that I think most people are sick of them. Elden Ring's grand idea was to tie their game to this open world cart, and expect the game to feel innovative and fresh again. It seems counterintuitive at best. It's funny because unless you're an indie title, I can't think of any AAA company doing the giant interconnected dungeon present in Dark Souls 1, arguably the feature that made it the standout game in the entire series, and has yet to be repeated. I'm not saying they should do it again, but I'd argue what is an open world giving them that an interconnected dungeon wouldn't? Something tells me a lot of empty space. What's disappointing was FromSoftware used to be masters at this. When every company would zig towards a trend, they would zag away from it. So why have they done this? I would argue loyalty. Loyalty to a AAA fanbase. Every decision with this game seems like that's the case. Loyalty to a fanbase can be great for a company. Passionate fans will always call you out for when you do the right thing or the wrong thing respectively. With that being said, being too loyal can be to your own detriment. I thought FromSoftware learned that lesson with Dark Souls 3, as that game seemed like it was made to placate fans of the series, and came off worse for it. The company has made Miyazaki their president. I'm not saying for 1 second he doesn't deserve it, but it's revealing by how it shows where the company's priorities are now, on a mission that Soul type games are all they will be producing in the future. I get chills thinking that do we have another Ubisoft on our hands? Perhaps yearly producers of the same game over and over again. I know some people will probably think I'm crazy by saying that, but all the telltale signs are there. Funnily enough, if you were to ask me straight out what was absent with the game, I would say it has no soul. So I yearn for the days where FromSoftware created the trends, not followed them. I can totally understand if you don't agree with everything I said necessarily, but I believe I proved that FromSoftware as a company has changed from the success of the Souls games, and so has their fan base, so I don't think you can outright dismiss it either. This has been Jamie on Elden Ring and the Souls series, and if you made it this far into the video, I want to thank you for watching.